everyone, welcome back. I cannot believe that we have started the 2026 F1 season and we are back with Michael Potts doing every race recap. And my gosh, we have so much to talk about. Michael, you are in beautiful Melbourne. Tell us about how the weekend was for you.
Well, that was quite something. Yeah, this is Melbourne. It's glorious, beautiful sunshine. What a wonderful place to start the season. It was quite an epic race. Just to sort of set the anticipation and feeling, before the race started, everyone in the paddock was going, well, this is going to be boring. This is going to be terrible. It's going to be a procession. The Mercedes are just going to blist off into the sunset. And we got a cracking race. I thought it was really, really good.
Normally, Australia is not terribly exciting. It was very exciting last year because we had the insane weather. And so obviously whenever there's crazy rain and unpredictability that way, it gets exciting. But I was glued to the screen. And I don't know if it was just confirmation bias, but the cars actually looked faster. And you can't deny the on-track battles and the cat and mouse with George and Charles as an example. Charles making up like all those places at the start, armored up to P3 at one point. And then obviously these insane crashes, which we would never wish on anyone. But yeah, so much unpredictability that it was crazy.
Yeah, that start was something else. You had Liam bogging down, but then you had Arvid and the two Ferraris going exceptionally well at the start. They could really win a lot of races this year from those flying starts. There was so much going on in that first lap. So I was down at turn 2 and you see the cars coming through and then the next lap they come through and the position is completely different. So much went on in that opening lap. Alonso firing through from the back. It was brilliant. Yeah, I think that we're in store for, it's a completely different style of racing. So we've got to get our heads around, what is now possible. And I wonder if some of this chaos is just because the drivers weren't used to racing like this and how to maximize it. And maybe by the time we get halfway through the year, they would have all honed their skills around techniques and that. But yeah, wow, it's enjoyable at the moment.
Yeah, I actually saw Lando talk because he hit the, whatever that air, device was that was on the track that came off Kimi's car. Was that practice or quali? But he was talking about, I hit that thing at quali. He's like, I hit that thing because you have to look at your steering wheel every 7 seconds because there's so much information that I had just happened to glance down at that moment and I just didn't see it. And so there's so much going on. And you're right, at the start, clearly, I don't know what happened, stalled or something. But Colapinto, did you see his onboard camera and how he had to avoid Liam? That was crazy. I honestly think that Colapinto Franco saved Liam's life. That could have been really, really bad.
We say Formula One as well, because massive start pileup would have been disastrous for the sport. They have so much more power at the getaway because of that electrical energy. The acceleration speeds are much, much greater than they've ever experienced. So we often see cars stalling on the grid in junior categories, and the drivers have plenty of time to get around them. They just don't have that time now because the speeds are so insane at the start.
I think I filmed a reaction video because I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. It was just crazy. And then I think Arvid talked about it. He's like, I was in P3 at one point. And I was like, what is going on? And it was really cool to see him score points in his first race, P8. So happy for him. The only rookie on the grid. So he did awesome.
Yeah, he had a mega weekend. It's an interesting one because he didn't win F2. I think he won 1 or 2 races. He didn't have an outstanding F2 season. But he's come into Formula One and he's competed as if he's been there the whole time. He just looks so self-assured, so confident. He looks like he's always been there. He's so good and so funny as well. I absolutely love the kid.
Unfortunately, I have to talk about some of the drama that happened. And there were many, many, many instances of it. Of course, the biggest one was Oscar. I was physically in pain when I saw that happen. I felt so bad for him, for all the people that showed up for him. And obviously he would never have wanted something like that to happen, but it was confusing. You mentioned how you thought it was like a replay and then you're like, wait a second, that's right now.
So I was on the grid, we were waiting for the cars to arrive and they were showing some replays of last year's race. So we saw the Dune crashing and Isaac crashing. And then there was this shot of a McLaren parked on the grass and Oscar emerged. I thought, well, that's when he went off last year. And I saw him climbing out of the car. I thought, well, he didn't climb out of the car last year. Then I realized that it was this year's car. And you just heard this audible gasp from about 200,000 Aussies as their hearts got broken before the race even started. It was so sad for them. I mean, these guys, some of them have been queuing since 3 or 4 in the morning to get a glimpse of him doing the Melbourne walk. There's this Australian curse. Ever since the Australian Grand Prix became part of the Formula One calendar, there's never been an Australian on the podium. And this is one of their best opportunities. And it just seems to go wrong at the worst possible, weirdest possible way. Daniel Ricciardo got close. He was on the podium once, but then got disqualified. And they've had some other great drivers, Mark Webber, some real greats of the sport. And not to be able to stand on the podium at your home race is a little bit sad.
Well, hopefully next year there will be less variables. There will be a whole year of driving this car under his belt. And if the weather stays under the control, at least he knows how to drive in the rain if that were the case. So fingers crossed. Maybe it's 3rd time's the charm.
Yeah, because the drivers have so much more to do now. They have so many more things to check. But it's not a bad thing. We saw a couple of years ago Fernando Alonso driving around giving Lance Stroll some advice because he was watching him on the TV screens. The drivers have far too much time on their hands. We've got to really push them to the limits and tax them with as many different things to try and fiddle around with. So, yeah, if it does make the racing a little bit more unpredictable, it's quite a good thing.
Well, on the topic of Aston Martin, they obviously have been making headlines this weekend with their car. And I was actually in shock. I think I texted you during the weekend about, I cannot believe that there could be permanent nerve damage from driving this car. And Lance described it as being like in an electrical chair. But I think they actually did fairly good. Like they got out there and did a lot of laps. I think Lance was up to 27 laps or something, and he didn't have nerve damage by the sounds of it. So, but they are definitely in a pickle.
Yeah, and I think it's probably worse than what we hear. I saw Adrian Newey in the press conference saying that they only had 2 batteries and they couldn't fly any new batteries in because no batteries had been made. There were only 2 in existence. They've now got to go to Shanghai and race with these batteries. The car is apparently destroying batteries. So all the batteries they had, they've annihilated between Barcelona, Bahrain, and the start of this race. It sounds like Honda had a massive restructuring when they thought that they were leaving the sport. They assigned a lot of their experienced engineers to other parts of the company. A lot of their key people also left and joined Honda. And I don't think Aston Martin was aware of this. I think it was a bit of a surprise when they kind of started seeing the engine data and they just realized how bad things were. There is a little bit of hope for them because they were terrible, but they managed to improve on being terrible to showing some good times. If they can get that reliability going, they might be up there quite quickly. But yeah, absolutely devastating way to start the season for everyone involved in the team.
That is interesting because I was very confused about how all of a sudden this is a problem, because Adrian had left Red Bull a year in advance to go and work on this 2026 car. And it just seemed like, how is this a problem that's just known right now? So you're saying that Aston Martin were unaware at the lack of progress that Honda was making on the engine, and then they show up to testing and it's like, oh my gosh, this is a fail.
Yeah. I think it ran okay on the dyno, but it doesn't respond very well to being bumped. When it's in the car, there's a series of vibrations that are caused, which are destabilizing the engine. So it was something that they didn't pick up in all of the kind of pre-race testing, but it was a problem that they had back in the McLaren days. And the engineers who had solved that problem, who had worked on it, had all been reassigned or had left the company. So it was almost like discovering an old problem for the first time with a new set of people. It took them a long time to solve it the last time as well. So that's a bit worrying.
Yeah, well, we hope Aston can turn it around. When I listened to Adrian's press conference, I felt so horrible for him. He talked about feeling helpless, and he's so experienced. And yeah, I really hope it turns around.
Yeah, things can turn around really quickly. I mean, Honda went from being disastrous to winning races quite quickly. We all want to see them up there. We want to see Fernando having a shot at kind of getting at least another race win. He's had such bad luck when it comes to team selection. I think everyone thought that this was finally his time, but not yet.
Fingers crossed. Well, on a more positive note, Michael, let's talk about Mercedes and how Toto is the Cheshire Cat. He's grinning, he's blinking at cameras, he is loving the new regs, and Mercedes is so back.
Yeah, we need Christian Horner to kind of like balance it out a little bit. Yeah, Mercedes have done a phenomenal job. There was a lot of talk about which teams were sandbagging. No one really knew whose pace was where at the end of testing. And it turns out it was Mercedes that people suspected it, but they had hit it quite well. And they do look very, very, very dominant. I think they could sew this championship up quite quickly this year. It was great to see Kimi doing so well. He had a very, very troubled weekend, but he still managed to get second place. I think that's going to give him a lot more confidence going into the year. He's definitely very quick.
Yes, I thought it was crazy that he had that ridiculously bad crash. They fixed the car in 2.5 hours. He said that they did not have time to do any type of like balance or setup work to it. So he just went out and drove the thing and qualifies like P2. Like, what? So, like, clearly, even without managing the details, they're a much better car. And do you know how many seconds George was ahead of Lando at the end of the race?
No.
51 seconds.
Wow, that's huge. Yeah, the McLaren really didn't look like it was in the top four this weekend. I think if Max hadn't started at the back, Lando would have been racing by himself quite a lot. But yeah, that Kimi lap was insane. So he comes out of the garage, the car hasn't driven, hasn't done any setup or anything like that. And I think at the time he went and put the fastest lap in. It was a mega lap. And to get everything sort of hooked up so perfectly was great. I was near the crash when it happened, and his car was absolutely destroyed. I don't know how they rebuilt it so quickly, but every single part of that car had damage, and he really, really wrecked it. Max also had that huge crash in qualifying. So we have three main drivers, having crashes in weird places that normally you wouldn't crash in those places or in those situations. The fragility of the cars around the new rules that the drivers need to come to terms with.
Yeah, I feel like obviously Mercedes clearly in the lead. I think Ferrari is probably second. And I think the dark horse could be Red Bull if they fix the reliability issues, because Isa qualified P3 and then he had the engine blow up. And then Max, I think he had a similar issue where all of a sudden the power kicked in and he was under braking and he just couldn't correct it at that speed. But it looks like the car's actually fast if they can fix the reliability stuff.
Yeah. Imagine if Max was P3 in that race, things would have been a little bit different. I don't think he would have been mugged into turn one as easy as Hadjar was. So yeah, it's going to be interesting in China. I think Red Bull might be a little bit stronger in China. So yeah, I think those three are quite close. McLaren's problem, they've got such a limited amount of aerodynamic and development budget this year compared to everyone else because they finished first. That they've kind of taken a very conservative approach to their first car so that they can adapt it easily once they see which aerodynamic direction is the better one. So they're almost sacrificing these early races so that they can get into an optimal position with spending less money later.
Oh, interesting. Well, Lando, in his post-race press conference, he talked about the Ferrari a lot and how he said he thinks that the Ferrari is the best car, not the Mercedes. He said the Ferrari. And he specifically talked about how their cornering speeds were out of this world. And the Ferrari does look really good. They made, I think, another strategy blunder during the safety cars. It's like, I don't understand. I don't understand how many times can a wrong make a right? Hopefully there will be ones that it will come around.
Yeah. New rig, same Ferrari. Well, so if they probably weren't going to pit Charles at that safety car because they wanted track position. But Lewis definitely wanted to be pitted. If they had pitted Charles probably could have got P2. I think George was always quicker yesterday than in the Ferrari, but they definitely could have got him into P2 because there's a huge gap between where George was and where Antonelli was. Mercedes managed to double stack the two cars. So there was a big space of tarmac to put Leclerc in if he had followed George. So I think they've definitely missed a P2. And maybe Lewis might have been a podium contender if they'd double stacked both of their cars. He'd definitely been fighting with Kimi. So big questions over at Maranello after this one.
Well, hopefully, I think fixing strategy is faster than fixing a bad car. So
I don't know.
Hopefully.
It's been a few years now, but the Ferraris did look very, very good. And that cornering speed, when I was shooting down track level around 2 and 3, and they just looked so stuck onto the track, and they were going through those corners rapidly. It was very, very cool to watch. Back in Bahrain, the first test in Bahrain, all the cars looked absolutely unreliable going through the corners, and now they look stuck on, sharp. It's a huge change in just a couple of days on track. So I think we'll see some rapid development with the cars overall.
Well, I think the Tifosi have a lot to cheer for this year, and I am really, really excited to see how it progresses. I've never seen Lewis happier. He was smiling, he was cracking jokes, he was relaxed, it looks. So I'm really hoping that they will be able to put the fight to Mercedes.
He loves China. He won that sprint race last year. So I think we're going to a track that he excels at. Very, very excited to see what he does there.
So why don't we talk about, Michael, the new teams? What did you see and observe with Audi and Cadillac in Melbourne?
Audi, I thought, did incredibly well. They scored points with Bortoleto. They probably could have done better. Bortoleto stopped in the pits entry after qualifying too. Almost caused a massive crash. Lindblad came around the corner and Gabby was grinding to a halt. Arvid almost went into the back of him and just had to do some amazing evasive driving to avoid that. But that knocked him out of Q3. And Hulkenberg had the failure going into the grid. So if those two reliability issues hadn't happened, they might have been a much better weekend. But I thought they did well. It's Audi's first engine. The car looked very good. It's very innovative with those side pods. It's a huge step up from when it was Stake Sauber. Yeah, that was a little bit of a joke team. This is now a serious racing outfit. And I think that they're going to be probably best of the rest. Cadillac had their first weekend. Now, this is an amazing weekend for Cadillac. It was a year ago on Saturday that they received approval to become a Formula One team. So they've really just had 1 year of being a full race team. They were hiring people before that and they were setting things up. But in the job application, they couldn't say, you'll be joining a Formula One team. They had to sort of use euphemisms like the pinnacle of motorsport and things like that. I spent a lot of time in the Cadillac garage with the Cadillac team. It's a really, really impressive group of people who are working there. Dan Taurus is a giant in motorsport. He owns a few race teams and they're all at the pinnacle of the sport. So he competes to win. And he's partnered with GM, who had a lot of their execs there. They putting a lot of emphasis on Formula One. They've got huge plans, huge aspirations. They might be excited that they finished their first race this weekend. They didn't finish last. But I think this is a team with huge ambition, and it won't be long before we see them really getting quite aggressive. The engine project is going pretty well. They are, I think, planning to launch their own engine at the next rule cycle. They've done a lot of things that bigger teams maybe take longer to get to. They have a massive disadvantage compared to Haas, which is the last team. Haas joined a year after the rule cycle changed, and they basically bought the previous year's Ferrari. They repainted it, put some stickers on it, and away they went, and they finished fifth. These guys are starting completely from scratch. They're building pretty much everything themselves except for the engine. So, yeah, very, very impressed.
Definitely. Well, one team that didn't make an impact that I was surprised is Williams. They were fifth in the constructors last year. Best result that they've had. I think Carlos retired, or I can't remember, but they didn't score any points, and they didn't have a good week.
Yeah, and Williams, they were almost as bad as Aston Martin because they stopped development at the beginning of the year. They focused on this year, and they weren't able to make that Barcelona test. They arrived in Bahrain with a car that's massively overweight, and you're kind of thinking, well, where did it go wrong in the planning? Because the other teams who had less time have done a better job. Did they overcomplicate it? Did they overthink it? Did they, there's some process somewhere that hasn't worked. And it's not Williams' first time for being late and overweight. So it seems like it's something that's more organizational. They have a very, very good engine. They had a lot of time to develop. They had a lot of wind tunnel time, a lot of development time. So yeah, it's very, very sad.
Yeah, because Haas and Alpine, they did pretty good. Oli, he was in P7. He did great. And Pierre was P10. They had one of the two drivers in the points, so it's a tight battle already in that part of the midfield. I really hope that, Williams, I was just surprised after all the success that they had, like in the momentum. I think it would kind of carry over.
Yeah, also been exceptional. They have the smallest budget and they've produced probably the best car. I think there was a bit of an issue on Ocon's side, but you could see it with Behrman that it's a very, very fast car. And they were developing quite late into the season last year. So a completely different approach to Williams, and it seems to have worked quite well for them. Alpine as well, they were in the best position to attack this year. They had the biggest budget. I think Pierre did a very good race. But yeah, it's a bit of a nice fight between Audi, Alpine, and Haas at the moment.
Looking ahead, Michael, we have Shanghai and then Japan next. And then after that, it's supposed to be Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. And with everything going on in that part of the world, do you actually think that those races will happen? Or have you heard some mutterings in the paddock about rescheduling, new locations, backup plans?
Yeah, it's so tragic what's happening there. And, motor racing is one thing, but the poor people having to live through this absolute hellscape that's going on there now. It's unbelievable. But yeah, there's been lots of chatting about what's going to happen. There's talk of just cancelling the 2 races. There's talk of cancelling Bahrain and keeping Jeddah. It's on the other side of the Gulf, so it should be a bit safer. There's talk of going to different venues, and if Formula One is going to do that, they probably need to decide around the Chinese Grand Prix weekend, because they need about 3 weeks to move all the stuff to the new venues. If that happens, it could be Imola or Portimao, possibly Istanbul Park. Those seem to be the most likely candidates. I know South Africa has put in a bid to try and host one of the races, so that could be a way for them to get in. And there's a lot of uncertainty. If they cancel these 2 races, they won't be able to reschedule them to another time in the calendar, because it gets too hot in the Middle East around summer, and there's just no space in the calendar towards the end of the year. So yeah, to wait and see. It'll be great if they do go ahead, because that'll mean that everything has settled down. So yeah, let's hold thumbs and hope that happens.
Yeah, definitely. So the options are either cancel completely and the calendar gets reduced by 2 races, or essentially replace them with alternative venues who have kind of put their hands up to say, we could be an option if that needed to happen. Yeah, of course, like our hearts go out to everyone who's living in that area and like having to live through this. And like F1 is not a big deal compared to that, but there is like I can't imagine also the logistical nightmare that this would also cause for F1. There's a lot of logistics involved in changing direction. So canceling it might actually be the easier option than replacing, but there's obviously a big commercial impact if they don't replace.
Yeah, there's contracts with thousands of suppliers, global partners, TV deals that are all based on 24 races. So it might actually be easier to reschedule it than get the lawyers in to renegotiate all those deals. There is a logistical problem because they've left a lot of the garages in the Middle East. Formula One has about 6 copies of the garages, which is why they're able to do Melbourne this weekend and Shanghai next weekend. There's a whole new set of garage equipment that's already in Shanghai. It's been set up since Saturday. So there's 2 sets of these in the Middle East to cover the back-to-back races in Bahrain and Jeddah. And there's nothing in Europe. So they'd have to find some way of getting all of that kit from Bahrain, from Jeddah into Europe if they were going to reschedule.
Well, I do not envy the decision there, but the best case scenario is that things get better and that they can go ahead with business as usual. But until then, we will sit tight to see what happens. Michael, should we close with some predictions for Shanghai? Because I got Australia horribly wrong and I want to redeem myself with this next race, because maybe there's a little bit more data to go off.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were trying to make predictions with very, very little understanding of what the actual pecking order will be. Yes, okay. Shanghai. So Shanghai, it's a completely different circuit, different form of energy recovery. Yeah, it's not going to be the same as Melbourne. So do you want to start with your predictions?
I have a question for you first. So I know Shanghai is very high speed. Who has good straight line speed that you saw? Because I'm trying to, does Ferrari or is Ferrari just very good in the corners?
Very, very good question. Ferrari have been logging very fast times, but I think it's Mercedes that have the fastest straight line speed. But I think there's some very, very technical corners in Shanghai. So you need to be good on both.
Okay. So if that is the case, I'm going to go with a very conservative prediction with George, Kimi, and Lewis, because Lewis loves Shanghai. He won the sprint race last year, and Ferrari seems to be the next best car to Mercedes. So that's my prediction.
Yeah, I think that's pretty solid. Yeah, I think it is Mercedes again. So I'm going to go for George. I kind of want to do the same as you because I think it feels like the most logical option. I'm going to go mix it up a bit. I'm going to go Lewis's first win, followed by Charles and Kimi, with a gremlin affecting George because he's had a very, very smooth run up to now. And everyone else has had a problem. And he's the only one, as far as I know, who's sailed through so far unscathed. So I think it's probably his turn to have a gremlin somewhere in the weekend. It's a sprint weekend as well, so they have even less time to kind of get their act together. So I think these predictions work either for the sprint or the race, whichever one we get closest to. Cool. Well, thank you very much. It was lovely chatting.
Thanks for watching this race recap about Australia. I'm super excited to do this for every race that we have on the calendar this year. You can find all of Michael's socials linked below. And until Shanghai, we'll talk to you then. See ya.